Sales. So it used to be in sales when I was at PTC that the sales rep sort of controlled from the top of the funnel all the way to the bottom. So if somebody was interested, for example, at PTC in learning about our discounting or our reference customers or anything like that, they kind of had to go through me as the sales rep. And every time they asked me for something, it was quid pro quo. Sure, I'll give you a reference, but boy, can I meet your boss. And that's sort of all gone. If someone wants reference information, they go to Google, they go to LinkedIn Answers, they go to Twitter, and they just ask, and they find the information. And by the time they talk to a sales rep, it's very late in the process, and many times the potential customer knows more than the sales rep. The sales world's really changing a lot, and it's going to continue to change, particularly if you're selling into IT, because those IT people are allergic to salespeople. So sales change a lot. I'm not going to talk too much about that. Okay. So what's the founder, the entrepreneur, the CMO, the VP of sales job? First is to sort of understand all this stuff. And I think you showed up here, so you're trying to understand it. I think it's really good. And then you've got to decide, am I going to do this stuff or am I going to delegate it? And if I'm going to delegate it, who in my organization am I going to delegate it to? It may be somebody in marketing. It may be your co-founder. It may be somebody in support. It may be one of your engineers. It's somebody who's geeked out on this stuff. Somebody who's got a blog. Somebody uses RSS. Somebody who's on Twitter. Somebody who's really into this stuff. So you're either going to do it yourselves when you leave or find somebody in your organization who somebody's got to get on this stuff. You need to be super transparent about things. It used to be that you write this press release and it's like this foreign language of all this stuff that the PR agency creates that's not in your tongue. People don't care about that funny language people use today. They want things to be very transparent and very authentic. So the language on the internet that really works is your tongue, right like you speak. It really works well on the internet. And that's all really changed in the last couple of years. That sort of PR speak is dying. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. So a lot of people sort of really restrict who can write on the blog, a process for writing on the blog, who can use Twitter, who can use Facebook. Let it go. Let anybody in your company who wants to write an article on your blog, let them do it. Anybody in your company who wants to start a Twitter account, let them do it. Anybody in your company who wants to comment on the Facebook fan page, let them go. You want deeper reach, you want buy-in from your organization. Once in a very rare while, somebody will say something stupid and get you in a little bit of trouble, but the benefit is far outweighs the potential downside of it. Find those digital natives in your company who are into this stuff and empower them and get them charged up. What do people think about that?
How many of them have you fired that have made mistakes?
None. The one person who's had a potential to get fired was me. The only person who's really made a gaffe was me. I wrote an article and the title was "Is PR Dead?" ? And I'm still getting flamed for it a year later. But none of the employees have really written anything controversial. Yeah, I mean, people have more common sense, I think, than we give them credit for.
I think there's a good litmus test for the quality of your hiring process.
Yeah.
Anybody disagree with this? One place you may get stuck is if you work in a law firm or you work in a big bank. Stuff gets tricky. But if you're in a startup, I think you let it go.
What about publicly? Once you go public, do you think you can still have the openness you have today?
Yeah, I think you'd be pretty open. I mean, you can't be that open about your finances, but almost anything else. A lot of big companies, Sun Microsystems and IBM are actually pretty good about doing this stuff now. A lot of companies post guidelines about what you can talk about on your blog or on Twitter. We post the guidelines, and the guidelines were use common sense. I think those are the best guidelines you can use, but you can do very detailed guidelines. If you want to copy someone's guidelines, IBM's got the best guidelines in the business. You can do a search on IBM's social media guidelines. Okay, everybody with me so far? Everybody awake? Okay. Everyone see that in the back? I really like this cartoon. It's from The New Yorker. It's very, very true. On the internet, nobody cares what your brand is, how big you are, what your name is. You can be a nobody startup and come out of nowhere and take the world by storm. I mean, who was Michael Arrington who started TechCrunch? He was nothing. It doesn't matter how big a brand you are or what industry you're in. That's what I like about being a startup today. Like I said before, the friction in the marketplace is much lower. It's much easier today to spread the word about good ideas. There's very little friction. If the idea is good, people will pick it up in Twitter and Facebook and they'll link to your blog and they'll spread it for you. You don't have to hire somebody to spread it. You don't have to push the rock up the hill. There'll be pull in the marketplace. But you have to have really interesting products and you have very interesting content around it. And It's a great time to be an entrepreneur. It's a great time to be a founder. It's a great time to be in a startup. It's so much easier to spread your word today than it ever has been. So I actually think it's a great time to start a company. What I really like about being an entrepreneur and a marketer today is your success is a function sort of the width of your brain, not of the width of your wallet. So if you're not venture back, you're some guy in your garage in Waltham working on some interesting idea. It doesn't matter that you have a bunch of venture capital. Get out there in the blogosphere, start talking about your industry, and start pulling people in. It's about how creative you are and how smart you are. If you're smart and creative on the internet, you're in the right place. You take all the money you can find, you can't push that rock up the hill. The rock will roll back over you. If you've got a good idea and good content, boy, that rock will go by itself up that hill and really take off. So it's a really great time to be a founder, great time to be a startup, great time to be in a startup. Much, much easier to spread your ideas. I think this is my last slide. Anyone know what this is?
House on a cliff.
It's the Imperial Palace in Japan. And I took this picture. I used to live in Japan because of the moat. I think it's a really pretty moat. And I'm a big Warren Buffett fan. What Warren Buffett always talks about is, as a business person, you want to dig a moat, and every quarter you want that moat to be deeper and wider, and then you want to put sharks in it and put alligators in it. You want to create as much of a barrier to entry in your business as you possibly can. And that's what internet marketing does. So if I just think about Zappos for a second. Let's say I wanted to start a shoe company to compete with Zappos online. And Zappos is famous for customer service and a couple other things. And let's say my customer service were even better. The hard thing to compete with Zappos is that 1.5 million Twitter followers he's got, is the 10 million links into his website, is the huge Facebook presence. All that stuff creates massive barrier to entry around his business. So it used to be that you go to Bingham and hire a bunch of lawyers to get a bunch of patents, and that's how you create barrier to entry. Turns out in a software company it doesn't work that well, but what really works is you create barrier to entry around all these links into your site, ranking for every word you can think of in Google that's related to your business. Having lots of Twitter followers and a big Facebook presence. That stuff's really hard to replicate and really hard to climb over. So I'll give you another example. The HubSpot blog started 3.5 years ago when we started the company, and it's done really well, lots of followers, lots of links and all that. If you were to start a blog today to compete with our blog.hubspot.com, and your ideas were better, and your content was better, and you had a better writer, it's just brutally hard to climb over everybody else to get to HubSpot. Every time we publish an article, it spreads because we have a huge number of followers. It spreads in Facebook, spreads in Twitter. We rank for every term you can imagine in Google. That type of stuff is really hard to replicate. So if you're an early stage startup, you kind of got to start now, and this is how you defend yourself against new competitors coming into the marketplace. Okay, this is another kind of couple interesting slides. So between 1950 and 2000, great companies were built with outbound marketing. If I think about the new great companies being built today, none of these guys really advertise. You never see a TV ad or a radio ad. Times have really changed on how you build a big company. This is an interesting slide. This shows the Fortune 500 between 1955 and today, and the churn rate inside the Fortune 500 between 1955 and 1998 was about 4% a year. So about 20 companies fell out of the Fortune 500, and 20 companies went in. So once you're at the top of the mountain, you're kind of in the top of the mountain in the Fortune 500. Since 1998, the churn rate has more than doubled. It's about 9%. So 45 fall out, 45 come in. This tells me, again, the internet's really changing how marketing works, really changing how sales works, really changing how distribution works. If you want to shake it up in your industry, you need to adopt some of these inbound marketing principles and get on this curve and get in the Fortune 500. And then I guess my last slide. This is a book, Shameless Pimping. If you're into this stuff, please buy it. It's doing really well. It came out about 8 weeks ago. We sold 20,000 copies. It's on its third printing. These are free tools we built. This is websitegrader.com, press release grader, Facebook graders, blog grader, Twitter grader. Go to grader.com. And what these will do is analyze how good you are on the internet. So what Website Grader does is it looks at your website inside of Google, inside the blogosphere, in Twitter, and all the social media sites, and gives you a grade of 1 to 100 on how much mojo you have, essentially. And so it's a really good tool to tell you what's going on here. That's all I've got.